Hey guys, tonight we're going to talk about something you've probably held in your hands 1,000 times. Think about the last time you ate popcorn at the movies, or a piece of warm cornbread, or even just a corn chip. You hold that little piece of gold, that kernel of condensed sunshine, and you probably don't think much about it. But what if I told you that simple grain built empires, that it was once considered the literal flesh of a god, and that its journey from a wild weed to the food that fuels our world is one of the greatest, quietest epics in human history? This isn't just a story about agriculture. It's a story about faith, survival, and a 10,000-year partnership between humanity and a single, stubborn blade of grass. It's one of the stories of God you don't know. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a small, quiet gesture that helps this community of late-night history wanderers grow. And as always, I love seeing where you're all listening from. Go ahead and drop your city or country and the time in the comments. It's a wonderful way to feel connected in our shared stillness. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing in a river valley, somewhere in what will one day be called southern Mexico. The air is thick and humid, smelling of damp earth and the sweet decay of tropical leaves. The year is approximately 7000 BC. There are no pyramids here, no cities, no calendars carved in stone. There is only the green, buzzing, relentless vibrancy of the world. You are a hunter, a forager. Your life is a constant, rhythmic search for calories. You follow the peccaries, you dig for roots, and you gather whatever the land offers. And today, what it's offering is, well, it's a bit of a letdown. You are looking at a weedy, almost scraggly-looking grass that grows in patches along the riverbank. It's called teosinte, and it is, to be frank, a botanical disappointment. It doesn't have a big, generous ear. It has a single, stick-like stalk with maybe a dozen kernels on it. And kernels is a generous term. They're tiny, each one locked away in a stony, triangular shell that is almost as hard as a pebble. It's like hoping for a loaf of bread and being given a single, fossilized crouton. Eating this stuff seems less like a meal and more like a punishment, so why do you bother? Because you are hungry, and your people have been hungry for generations. And you have learned that inside that impossibly hard shell is a tiny speck of starchy energy, so you gather it. You spend hours walking the river valley, stripping the meager stalks from the tough grass. You carry them back to your temporary camp, a small clearing marked by a fire pit and the shelters your small family group has made from branches and leaves. Now comes the hard part. How do you get to the food? Historians and archaeologists still debate this. You don't have fancy mills, you have rocks. You kneel on the ground, placing the hard little kernels on a flat stone of metate, and you grind another stone of them. It's grueling work. For every minute you spend grinding, you get a tiny pinch of coarse, gritty flour. The sound is a dry, scraping rhythm against the backdrop of the jungle. It's the sound of survival. Another theory, and it's a fun one to imagine, is that you discovered the world's first and worst popcorn? Perhaps one of your ancestors accidentally dropped a few of these stony kernels into a fire. Most would do nothing. But maybe one, just one, heated to the perfect temperature, would pop with a sharp crack, breaking its own shell and exposing the fluffy slap white starch inside. It wouldn't be a bucket of buttery goodness. It would be a single, tiny puff of food, probably tasting faintly of ash. But it would be a revelation, a breakthrough, a way to get past that shell without smashing your knuckles on a rock. You live in a world without long-term plans. You don't think about next year, or even next season. You think about today. But even so, you notice things. You are a scientist of your own small world. You notice that some patches of this teosinte grass have slightly larger kernels, and others you notice that a plant that grows accidentally from the discard pile near your camp, your garbage dump, fertilized with whatever you've thrown away, seems to grow a little stronger. Its kernels a little less rock-like without knowing it. You have begun the most important agricultural experiment in human history. You aren't a genius inventor who suddenly decided to domesticate a plant. You are simply a hungry person making a series of very small, practical choices. When you gather seeds to carry with you, you instinctively pick the ones from the plants that look the most promising. When you clear a small patch of land to throw some seeds down, you are starting the slow, 10,000-year-long conversation with this wild grass. You are nudging it, generation by generation, toward a future you cannot possibly imagine. Are standing here, in the mud and the heat, holding a pathetic-looking weed, and you have no idea that in your hands, you hold the seed of empires, the food of millions, the body of a god. You just know it's almost time to start grinding again. That slow, patient work of grinding and selecting, year after year, century after century, is the physical reality. It's the history you can trace in the soil and in the gradual transformation of the plant itself. But a plant this important, a plant that is slowly becoming the very foundation of your people's existence, cannot simply be a plant. It needs a story. It needs a pedigree. It needs a divine origin worthy of its growing importance. A grain that demands so much work must have a reward that transcends mere sustenance. It must have a soul. And so, as you sit by the fire, scraping the last bit of gritty flour from the stone, you are told a story of how this food came to be. The world, the elders tell you, was not always as it is now. After the great gods had fashioned the heavens and the earth, they created humanity. But they made a critical error in project management. They had created these new, fragile beings, but had forgotten to provide a pantry. Humans were weak, hungry, and had nothing to eat. They wandered the earth, chewing on roots and whatever else they could find, and the gods worried that their new creation would fail, a beautiful idea that would starve before it could flourish. The other gods, the powerful, terrifying ones, the gods of war and sacrifice, were stumped. But one god was different. He was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, a beautiful and strange paradox of a deity, a serpent of the earth covered in the brilliant green feathers of the quetzal bird of the sky. He was not a god of brute force, but of wisdom, of the wind, of art and learning. He looked upon the struggling humans with a compassion the other gods lacked. He decided he would solve their problem. One day, Quetzalcoatl was walking the earth, when he saw a tiny black ant hurrying along a trail, carrying something in its mandibles. It was a single grain of that miraculous food maize. Quetzalcoatl, the great creator god, stopped and asked the tiny creature where it had found such a treasure. The ant, perhaps recognizing it was being questioned by a literal force of nature, was evasive at first. But Quetzalcoatl was persistent. Finally, the ant revealed its secret. The maize was hidden inside a mountain called Tonacatepet, the mountain of sustenance. It was a divine storehouse, a celestial Fort Knox, where the Tualacotha reigned. Gods, the gods of moisture and fertility, had hoarded away all the world's grain. Quetzalcoatl went to the mountain, but there was no entrance. It was a seamless wall of stone. He tried to push it with his godly strength, but it wouldn't budge. He commanded the winds to blow it down, but the mountain stood firm. The other gods suggested smashing it open, a typically unsubtle solution, but Quetzalcoatl knew a direct assault would scatter and destroy the precious grain inside. He had to be clever. He returned to the little black ant and asked for its help. And here, in the telling of the story, you lean in closer, because Quetzalcoatl, the great feathered serpent, a being of immense power, performs an act of incredible humility. He transforms himself into a tiny, black ant, a perfect replica of his guide. This was the ultimate undercover mission. He followed his guide to a minuscule crack in the side of the great stone mountain, a fissure so small that only an insect could pass through. He squeezed himself inside. The air inside the mountain was cool and smelled of damp earth and unimaginable abundance. It was a cavern filled with colossal piles of grain, not just maize, but beans, chia, and amaranth. It was the pantry of the gods, shimmering piles of yellow, red, black, and blue maize, a rainbow of sustenance. The temptation to take it all must have been immense, but as an ant, he could only carry one grain at a time. So, with great effort, he picked up a single, perfect kernel of black maize, turned around, squeezed back through the crack, and returned to his own form. He brought that single kernel back to the waiting, hungry humans. He didn't just give it to them. He chewed it in his own divine mouth and placed the softened mashta first masan to the lips of the first man and woman, nourishing them. Then he taught them how to plant the seed. He showed them how to honor the earth, how to watch the sky for rain, and how to harvest the grain that would become their lifeblood. Historians and mythologists, of course, find many variations of this tale across different cultures in ancient Mexico. Sometimes he follows the ant, sometimes he transforms. Sometimes he brings back one kernel, sometimes a whole armful. But the core of the story is always the same. Your food is not common. It is a treasure, stolen for your benefit by a loving God who chose cleverness over force, and humility over pride. That tough little kernel you work so hard to grind is not just a plant. It is a divine secret, a piece of a hidden mountain, a gift from a feathered serpent. And knowing this makes the backbreaking work of the grinding stone feel less like a chore and more like a prayer. That's the story you tell around the fire. It's the story for the soul, the one that gives meaning to the ache in your back and the calluses on your hands. But the truth on the ground, the story of the body, is slower, quieter, and in its own way, even more miraculous. It's a story written not by gods, but by generations of your people, mostly the women, in the simple, repetitive acts of planting, tending, and harvesting. It is the 10,000-year edit. You are holding the original draft of maize in your hands. This wild teosinte is, to be blunt, the beta version of a plant, full of bugs and terrible design choices. Remember those rock-hard kernels? Less like a grain and more like geological debris? That's feature number 1, that needs fixing. Feature number 2 is that when the plant is ripe, the kernels don't wait patiently to be picked. The stalk shatters, flinging those little rock pellets everywhere. It's great for the plant's own survival. It's spreading its seeds, but for a hungry human, it's a disaster. It's like trying to eat a sandwich that explodes into crumbs the moment you bring it to your mouth. The work of editing this plant begins with observation. You live with this grass. You know its rhythms better than you know your own reflection. You are the lead quality assurance tester for the entire species. As you gather the day's meager harvest, your eyes are sharp. You notice a plant over there, by the big rock, that seems to hold on to its kernels for a day longer than the others. You find another whose stony shell seems just a tiny bit thinner, a little easier to crack. You don't know what a gene is. You have no concept of DNA, but you are a natural geneticist. You are selecting for traits that so you make a choice. The seeds from that slightly better plant, you don't just grind them all for today's meal. You save a few. You tuck them into a small pouch made of woven fibers. And next season, when you clear a small patch of ground near your camp, you don't just throw down any old seeds. You plant those specific, saved seeds. It's a simple act. An act of hope. You are placing a bet on a better future, one handful of kernels at a time. It's the slowest, most patient research and development program in the history of the world. Then, one season, a miracle happens. Not a flashy, divine miracle with feathered serpents, but a quiet, genetic one. You find a plant that's different. You touch its stalk, and the kernels don't shatter and fall. They stay put. They cling to the stalk, waiting for you. It's a mutation, a random genetic typo that turns out to be a brilliant new feature. For you, this is the botanical equivalent of winning the lottery. You can now harvest the entire plant at once, carrying it back to camp without losing half your food on the way. You guard the seeds from that plant like they are the most precious jewels on earth, and they are. Another generation passes, and then another mutation appears. A plant grows where the kernels are not encased in that impossible, tooth-breaking shell. They are naked, exposed, clinging to the central stalk. This changes everything. The grueling hours-long work of smashing and grinding is suddenly reduced. The food is accessible. The plant has become more generous, more willing to cooperate. Historians still debate how conscious this process really was. Were your ancestors, botanical geniuses, meticulously breeding a new superplant with a clear goal in mind? Or were they just very observant, lucky gardeners, favoring the plants that were a little less annoying to eat, and in doing so, unconsciously guiding its evolution? The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. You weren't following a blueprint, but you knew what you liked. You liked food that didn't run away. You liked food that didn't break your teeth. And so you favored the plants that gave you that dot, and as you change the plant changes you. Because you have now invested in this crop, you can't just wander off after the peccaries for months at a time. You have to stay close to your little garden plot. You have to weed it. You have to protect it from birds. This difficult, demanding grass is teaching you to settle down. It is slowly transforming you from a wanderer into a farmer. It's not a one-way relationship. It is a partnership. You are domesticating the maize, and at the same time, the maize is domesticating you. You are both growing together, bound by a shared need for sun, for water, and for a little patch of earth to call home. That partnership you forged with the maize plant, that slow, patient dance over thousands of seasons, has finally paid off. The harvest this year is different. It's not just enough. It is more than enough. You stand at the edge of your field, the stalks rustling in the dry autumn air, and you look at the baskets piled high with fat, golden ears of maize. After you have set aside enough to feed your family through the lean months, after you've saved the best seeds for the next planting, there is still a massive pile left over. You are looking at a concept that will rewrite the future of humanity. You are looking at a surplus. For generations, your world has been defined by its absence. Every calorie gathered was a calorie consumed. The future was a fog. But this pile of golden grain is different. It is tangible. It is solid. It is security. You can run your hands through the kernels, feel their smooth, dry weight. This is not just food. It is stored time. It is sunlight from last summer, captured and held, ready to be released in the dead of winter. It is the world's first and most important bank account, and the only form of interest is the occasional mouse that manages to sneak in. But this new wealth brings a new problem. What do you do with it? You can't just leave it in a pile on the ground. The rain will spoil it, the insects will devour it, and the rodents will see it as a personal invitation to an all-you-can-eat buffet. Your surplus requires technology. It demands innovation. So you turn your attention to the mud of the riverbank. You have always made small pots for cooking and carrying water, but now you need something bigger, something more permanent. That you gather the clay, you mix it with sand and water, and you begin to build. You don't use a potter's wheel. You use your hands, patiently coiling ropes of clay, one on top of the other, smoothing the walls as you go. You are building a massive ceramic vessel, a jar as tall as a child, designed not for today's meal, but for next year's survival. Historians still debate whether the maize demanded the pot, or the pot was simply waiting for the maize. What is certain is that they needed each other. After days of drying in the sun, you fire the great pot in a pit, and it emerges hard and resonant, ready to protect your treasure. But even a giant pot isn't enough. You need a dedicated building. You clear a patch of ground and drive posts into the earth. You weave branches between them and plaster the walls with a thick layer of mud and straw. You build a raised floor to keep the damp from the earth away, and you top it with a steep, thatched roof to shed the rain. You have built a cuscamatl, you have built a granary. It is the most important building you have ever made, more sacred than any shrine, because it holds the collective future of your people, and as you place the last ear of maize inside this new storehouse, a profound realization settles over you. You can't leave your small group used to follow the seasons, moving to new hunting grounds when the game grew scarce. But now, your wealth is here. Your future is rooted in this specific piece of land, locked away in your granary. You must stay to guard it, to tend the fields that will fill it again next year. This is the final step in the great transformation. For 10,000 years, you have been domesticating the maize. And now, finally, the maize has domesticated you. Your temporary camp of leafy shelters is abandoned. You build new houses, sturdier ones, with plastered walls and solid roofs, clustered around your granary. The footpaths you once made are now worn deep into the earth. The sound of children laughing echoes between the huts. At night, you no longer sleep with the anxiety of the hunt. You sleep with the deep, quiet security of a full belly and a fuller storeroom. You are no longer a wandering band. You are a village. And as you drift off to sleep, to the gentle sounds of the crickets and the whisper of the wind through the drying maize stalks, you feel a kind of peace your ancestors never could have known. Your village is now a permanent fixture, a cluster of sturdy homes huddled around the promise of the granary. The fear that haunted your ancestors, the daily, knowing fear of starvation, has receded. It has been replaced by a new, more sophisticated kind of anxiety, the fear of getting it wrong, the fear of planting too early and having the seeds washed away by a late rain, the fear of planting too late and having the stalks wither before they mature. Your survival no longer depends on the luck of the hunt, but on the precision of your timing. Your relationship with the world has changed. You don't just react to it anymore. You must anticipate it, and so, you turn your gaze upward. You need to understand the sky. You need a language to speak with time itself. This is a job for a specialist, for the man whose hands are not calloused from the planting stick, but stained with ink and charcoal. This is the job of the priest astronomer. He is the keeper of the days, the community's living clock. His task is to create a scaffold of order upon which your entire year will be built. He doesn't just watch the sun. He tracks the moon's phases, the patient journey of the constellations, and most importantly, the complex, looping dance of the morning star, Venus. From these celestial movements, he constructs a calendar, or more accurately, two of them, running in parallel like two intricate, interlocking gears. There is a 365-day solar calendar, which tracks the seasons of the physical world, and there is a 260-day sacred calendar, the Tezocan, which tracks the cycles of the gods. When these two calendars align every 52 years, it is a moment of profound cosmic importance, a renewal of the world. This calendar is not a simple grid of boxes you hang on the wall. It is a living, sacred machine, often carved into a colossal stone disk, a tapestry of gods, animals, and arcane symbols. It's less a farmer's almanac and more a sacred operating system for your entire civilization, and its primary function. The reason for its existence is to manage your relationship with maize. The life cycle of the grain dictates the liturgical cycle of your people. You no longer plant when you feel like it. You plant when the priest, after studying his stone charts and burning offerings of copal incense, declares that the correct day has arrived. The planting becomes a solemn festival. You don't just toss the seeds into the ground. You hold them in your hands as the priest walks through the fields, blessing them with smoke and chants. The seeds are precious. They are the children of last year's harvest, and you are entrusting them to the earth, the Great Mother. You might even offer a drop of your own blood, pricked from a finger, to mix with the seeds, a small personal sacrifice to feed the soil that will soon feed you. When the first green shoots pierce the soil, it is another cause for celebration, a festival for the tender youth of the maize god, a time to pray for rain. You make offerings to Tlaloc, the goggle-eyed god of storms, pleading with him to be gentle, to provide a nourishing drizzle, not a destructive deluge. But the greatest festival of all is the harvest. The entire village moves into the fields together. The air is filled with the dry, rustling sound of the stalks and the joyful shouts of your neighbors. The first, most perfect ear of maize harvested from each field is not eaten. It is treated with the reverence of a returning hero. You dress it up in fine woven cloth and colorful feathers. It becomes a temporary idol, a physical manifestation of the maize god's generosity. You place it in a shrine in your home, where it will watch over your family until the next planting season. Historians still debate the emotional reality of these festivals. Were they expressions of genuine joy and gratitude, or were they rituals born of deep anxiety, a desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable forces of nature? For you, they are both. You feel the profound relief of a successful harvest, but you also feel the ever-present knowledge that it is not guaranteed. The festivals are a way to formalize your gratitude and codify your hope. They are the conversation you have with your gods, a dialogue where the maize is both the topic and the language. The calendar tells you when to speak, the rituals tell you what to say, and the overflowing granary is the god's reply. The festivals and calendars have woven the maize into the very fabric of your society. The surplus has built your cities and structured your days. But the final step of this spiritual journey is not societal, it is cellular. It is the belief that this grain is not just something you eat to survive. It is, in the most literal sense imaginable, what you are made of. You gather with the other young people of the village, sitting at the feet of an elder, as she recites the sacred stories from the Popol Vuh, the great creation myth of the Kh. Maya. The firelight flickers across her wrinkled face as she tells of the gods' first attempts at creating humanity. It was, she explains, a process of trial and error, a bit of divine product testing. First, the gods tried to make humans out of wet clay, the kind you find by the river. It was a disaster. The figures were clumsy and weak. They couldn't stand up straight. They could speak, but their words were gibberish. And when it rained, they dissolved back into mud. A complete failure. The gods were disappointed and unmade. They're mud people. It was a good idea for pottery, a terrible idea for people. Next, the gods tried carving humans from wood. This attempt was more promising. The wooden people were strong and could walk and talk. They looked like humans. They even multiplied and populated the earth. But they had a fatal flaw. They had no heart. They had no memory, no gratitude. They wandered the earth aimlessly, never thinking to praise their creators or honor the gods. They were empty, hollow puppets. They treated the animals cruelly and used their pots and grinding stones without care. So the gods sent a great flood to destroy them, and in a particularly vivid detail of the story, the people's own tools and animals rose up in rebellion against them for their disrespect. The gods were frustrated. They had tried earth. They had tried wood. What was left? They sat in council, pondering what material could create a being that was both strong and thankful, physical and spiritual. Then, from the place of split water, for animals a coyote, a fox, a parrot, and a crow came to the gods, carrying ears of white and yellow maize. Here, the elder's voice drops to a reverent whisper. The gods took this maize, this divine gift, and they brought it to the great cosmic grandmother, the goddess Ixnyocain. She took the kernels, and with her sacred grinding stone, she ground them 9 times. She mixed the fine powdery flour, the masa, with the waters of creation, and from this sacred dough, she formed the bodies of the first 4 men. This time, it worked. The people made of maize were perfect. They were strong enough to walk the earth and wise enough to understand it. They could speak, and their first words were a prayer of thanks to their creators. They could see not just the world in front of them, but deep into the cosmos, understanding all the mysteries of the gods. In fact, they were a little too perfect. The gods worried that these new beings were their equals, so they blew a mist over their eyes, clouding their vision just enough so that they would focus on the world around them and remember their place. But the core of their being remained unchanged. You are not like maize. You are maize. This is not a metaphor for you. It is a biological fact. Your flesh is the sacred dough. Your bones are the sturdy stalk. Your blood is the life-giving sap. When you look at your own hand, you see the ghost of the grain. This belief permeates every aspect of your life. When a child is born, the umbilical cord is not thrown away. It is often buried in the family's maize field, a symbolic gesture that physically ties the new life back to the earth and the grain that will sustain it. It's the ultimate circle of life, connecting birth, food, and land in one powerful ritual. Historians still debate the profound psychological impact of this belief. How does it change your perception of the world if you believe your body is made from your staple food? It erases the line between the sacred and the mundane. The act of grinding maize is not a chore. It is an act of creation, echoing the work of the gods. The act of eating a tortilla is not just satisfying hunger, it is a kind of communion, a replenishing of your own sacred substance. It fosters a deep, instinctual respect for the food itself. To waste a single kernel of maize would be like tearing off a piece of your own skin. It is unthinkable. It is a sacrilege. You are bound to this grain, not just by hunger, but by blood, by bone, by the very matter of your existence. For thousands of years, this has been your entire world. A world built on maize, governed by a maize calendar, and inhabited by people made of maize. The great oceans that surround your land are the edges of the known universe. But one day, the universe gets much, much bigger. You are standing on a hot, sandy beach on the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. The year is 1492. Out on the horizon, you see something impossible. They are not canoes. They are floating mountains with great white wings, like colossal seabirds. They are the ships of Christopher Columbus, though you do not know his name. The two halves of the world, separated since the last ice age, are about to collide, and the shockwaves from that collision will change everything, especially your sacred grain. You watch as strange men paddle to shore in small boats. They are pale, their faces covered in thick hair. They are dressed in bizarre, heavy clothes and shiny metal shells that gleam in the tropical sun. You look at them with a mixture of fear and intense curiosity. What do they want? Are they men, or are they gods? They look at you, and at your world, with a similar confusion. They see your towering pyramids, your intricate goldwork, your bustling markets, but they are not here for architecture or art. They are here for wealth they can understand and carry home. They are here for gold, and they are here for souls. At first, your maize is just a curiosity to them, a strange, new food source. One of Columbus's men writes in his journal about a type of grain they call maize, noting that it is most tasty, boiled, roasted, or ground into flour. They are pragmatic. They see its potential as a food for livestock, or perhaps as a novelty. To show the king and queen back in Spain, they see a crop. You see the body of a god? The gap in understanding is as wide as the ocean they just crossed. You offer them tortillas, the daily bread of your people. They are unimpressed. They are men raised on wheat bread, the bread of Europe, the bread of the Bible. To them, your flat, unleavened maize cakes are strange, coarse, and peasant food. They do not understand the intricate process that makes your tortillas possible, the way you soak the kernels in a solution of wood, ash, or slaked lime. This process, which you call nixtamalization, is a crucial step passed down through generations. It softens the kernels, makes them easier to grind, and most importantly, it unlocks the niacin, vitamin B2, and essential amino acids within the maize, making it a complete and nourishing food. Without this ancient chemical wisdom, as they will tragically discover later, maize can be a poison. But for now, they just see a strange, inferior bread. The strangeness goes both ways. You watch as a Spanish priest sets up a makeshift altar on the beach. He holds up a small, thin, white wafer made of wheat flour. He speaks strange words over it, and he calls it the body of his god. You are confused. It is small and pale. It looks nothing like the vibrant golden kernels that form your own flesh. How can something so flimsy hold the power of a god? Your sacred food is robust, substantial, the product of sun and earth and rain. There seems a pale imitation, a ghost of a grain. Historians still debate what the first explorers truly thought. Did they see the sophisticated agriculture around them and marvel at its ingenuity? Or did their quest for gold and their conviction in their own religious superiority blind them to the deep spiritual and nutritional wisdom of your world? The written record suggests it was mostly the latter. They saw a potential profit, not a sacred partnership. They saw a resource to be exploited, not a divinity to be honored. You watch as they load crates onto their ships. They are taking samples of your world back to theirs. They take parrots with brilliant plumage, strange fruits, and a few golden masks they have managed to trade for, and among all these exotic treasures, they pack a few sacks of dried maize kernels. It is an afterthought, a botanical curiosity packed alongside the real prizes. They have no idea that this humble grain, this unassuming passenger, will ultimately have a greater impact on their world than all the gold they could ever hope to find. They think they are conquering a new world. They don't realize they are about to be conquered by its corn. The men with pale faces are not gods. And they are not leaving. More ships arrive, carrying not just explorers, but soldiers, governors, and priests. They have come to stay, and they have come to change you. Your world is turned upside down. Your temples are torn down. Their stones used to build churches. Your sacred books, filled with the wisdom of the calendar and the stories of the gods, are gathered into a great pile in the plaza and burned, their knowledge turned to ash and smoke. You are told your gods are demons. Your beliefs are superstitions. Your way of life is an error that must be corrected. At the heart of this great correction is a profound theological conflict, a battle of grains. It is the battle of wheat versus maize. A Spanish friar, a man with earnest, burning eyes, tries to explain his faith to you. He speaks of a single, all-powerful God, and of his Son, who came to earth to save humanity. He tells you that this Son's body and blood are the true spiritual food, and that you can partake in it through a sacred ritual called the Eucharist. He leads you into the cool, dark interior of his new church. The air smells of incense and damp limestone. At the altar, he performs the mystery. He takes a small, round, perfectly white wafer of bread, made from wheat flour, and he says the sacred words. This, he tells you, is now the body of Christ. This is the food that will save your soul. You kneel, and you try to understand. You are a person for whom the idea of a god becoming food is the most natural concept in the world. You have always known that you are made from maize, that the maize god sacrifices himself each year to feed his people. So you are open to the idea, but you are also deeply confused. Why must it be wheat? Wheat doesn't grow well here in the hot, humid lands. It is a foreign crop, a weak and spindly grass that struggles in your soil. Your maize is strong, generous, perfectly adapted to this world. Surely a truly powerful God would choose to make his body from the strongest, most life-giving grain, not this pale, sickly import. To you, insisting on wheat seems like a stubborn, arbitrary rule. It's like insisting that a fish can only live on land. A priest tries to explain the deep symbolism of wheat in his own tradition. He speaks of the Last Supper, of bread as the staff of life in the Holy Land, of parables about sowing seeds and separating the wheat from the chaff. His stories are rich and beautiful, but they are stories from a world you have never seen. A desert landscape of sand and olive trees don't resonate in your bones the way the story of the feathered serpent and the ant does. This creates an immense unspoken tension. The Spanish see your devotion to maize as a form of idolatry that must be stamped out. They cut down the sacred ceiba trees that you believe connect the earth and sky. They forbid the festivals tied to the maize calendar. They tell you that placing a dressed-up ear of corn on an altar is a pagan blasphemy. To them, there can only be one true host, one sacred body. But you cannot simply erase thousands of years of belief. You cannot stop seeing the divine in the golden kernel. So your faith goes underground. You learn to blend, to synthesize. This is a process historians call syncretism, and it happens all over your conquered lands. You continue to bake your maíz tortillas, but perhaps now you mark them with the sign of a cross. You look at the statue of the Virgin Mary, with her gentle, sorrowful face, and she reminds you of your own beautiful, life-giving maize goddess. You learn the stories of the Christian saints, and you find echoes of your own gods and their deeds. You are forced to accept the wheat wafer in the church on Sunday. You take the thin, papery disc onto your tongue. It dissolves, tasting of flour and nothingness. You accept it as the body of their God. But later that day, in the privacy of your own home, you eat a warm, thick, golden tortilla, made from the sacred dough of your ancestors. And in your heart, you know which one truly feels like the bread of life. You are now a person of two faiths, two bodies, two gods. You live in the quiet, unresolved space between the wheat and the maize, a spiritual crossroads from which there is no turning back. While you are wrestling with the clash of faiths in your homeland, the physical kernels of maize are beginning their own quiet, relentless conquest of the globe. The journey is astonishingly fast, a testament to the plant's incredible adaptability. It is a biological blitz. Within a single generation of Columbus's return, the seeds you and your ancestors spent millennia perfecting have crossed the Atlantic and found fertile ground in the Old World. The first stop is Spain. It arrives as a curiosity, planted in the royal botanical gardens of Seville and Madrid. Noblemen and scholars look at this strange, tall grass with its fat, symmetrical ears and marvel at its strangeness. They call it panizo, or Indian corn. At first, it's mostly grown as an ornamental plant, a conversation piece for the gardens of the wealthy. Like a botanical trophy from the New World, it's the 16th century equivalent of having a ridiculously oversized and exotic houseplant, but sailors and merchants are more pragmatic. They see its real value. They notice how quickly it grows and the sheer volume of grain a single stalk can produce compared to wheat or barley. They recognize a workhorse, when they see one, Spanish and Portuguese ships, which are now beginning to ply the trade routes to Africa and Asia, start carrying sacks of maize not just as a novelty, but as a reliable food source for their long voyages. It's cheap, it's plentiful, and it keeps. Well, the grain hops from one port to another. It arrives in the Philippines with Spanish traders. It lands on the west coast of Africa with Portuguese slavers, who see it as a cheap, high-energy food to feed their human cargo. From there, it spreads inland along the ancient trade routes, passed from one village to another, one hand to another. It arrives in China, probably through both the overland Silk Road and by sea. In the mid-1500s, the impact is revolutionary. This American grain thrives in places where traditional Old World crops struggle. It can grow in the wet, humid lowlands of southern China, where rice paddies are difficult to maintain. It can grow on the dry, hilly slopes of the Balkans, where wheat fails. It can survive in the varied climates of Africa. For peasant farmers around the world, this new plant is a miracle. It is a security against the famines that have always haunted them, a way to feed their families when the wheat harvest fails or the rice crop is meager. Historians and demographers still argue about the sheer scale of its impact, but many agree that the introduction of New World crops, particularly maize and the potato, was one of the primary drivers of the massive global population boom that began in the 16th century. You, a farmer in China or a villager in Angola, suddenly have access to a reliable, high-yield source of calories. More food means more children survive. More children mean more hands to work the fields. It is a powerful, positive feedback loop. Are a farmer in a small village in the mountains of northern Italy. The land is poor, the soil is thin. Growing enough wheat to pay your lord's taxes and feed your family is a constant struggle. Then, a merchant brings seeds of this new crop, Granturco, the Turkish grain, as you mistakenly call it. You plant it on a hillside plot that was always too rocky for wheat, and it grows. It grows tall and strong, requiring little attention. The harvest is abundant. You grind the dried yellow kernels into a coarse flour and you learn to cook it into a thick, comforting porridge you call polenta. It fills your belly, it keeps you warm in the winter. It saves your family from starvation. You do not know the myths of Quetzalcoatl. You have never seen a pyramid. You have no idea that the grain you are stirring in a pot over your fire was once considered the flesh of a god. You have stripped it of all its sacredness. You have taken the divine body and turned it into simple fuel. The spiritual journey of the maize seems to have ended. It has been transformed from a god into a commodity, from a sacred trust into simple peasant food. But its journey is far from over, and in losing its soul, it will soon create a new kind of suffering all its own. In the Americas, you were made of maize. It was your flesh, your mother, your god. In Europe, you are made of wheat and barley and rye. Maize is something else. It is an immigrant, a foreigner, and like many immigrants, it is looked upon with a mixture of utility and suspicion, and it is quickly assigned a place at the very bottom of the social ladder. You are a wealthy landowner in 18th century France. You walk through your fields of wheat, the king of grains. Wheat is noble. It is the grain of the Bible, the grain of civilization, the grain that makes the light, airy, white bread that graces your table. White bread is a status symbol, announces to the world that you are wealthy enough to afford flour that has been sifted and refined, stripped of its coarse, brown bran. Then you walk to the edge of your estate, to the small marginal plots of land you rent out to your tenant. Farmers, here, they are growing maize. They call it Bel de España, or Spanish wheat. The crop thrives, its tall, green stalks a testament to its vigor, but it is not a crop you would ever consider eating yourself. It is peasant food. The flour it produces is yellow, coarse. The bread it makes is heavy, dense, a food of last resort. You see it as a useful tool for managing your estate. The high yields mean your tenants can feed their families and still have enough left over to pay their rent too. Even better, you can use the bulk of the harvest to fatten your pigs and cattle. The grain has been demoted. It is no longer the body of a god. It is the food of the poor and the food of animals. This social hierarchy of grains is not unique to France. All across Europe, the same story unfolds. In Italy, the rich eat their pasta and white bread made from durum wheat. The poor eat polenta. In Romania, it becomes the ubiquitous mânclic, a polenta-like staple so central to the peasant diet that it becomes a national symbol of rustic hardship. The grain that built pyramids in the New World is now associated with poverty and struggle. In the Old you are a poor farmer in northern Spain. Your entire existence revolves around maize. You eat a maize porridge for breakfast. You eat a thick maize bread for your midday meal. You eat a maize soup for dinner. Your chickens peck at maize kernels in the yard. Your pig is being fattened on maize. The grain is keeping you alive, but it is a monotonous, joyless survival. The vibrant multicolored kernels of the Americas, the sacred black, blue, and red varieties have been lost. European farmers have selected almost exclusively for the highest-yielding yellow and white varieties. The rainbow has been reduced to a monochrome. This demotion from sacred sustenance to mere survival rations is a spiritual loss, a stripping away of millennia of culture and meaning. But there's a physical loss as well, a crucial piece of knowledge that did not make the journey across the Atlantic. You do not know about nixtamalization. You do not know that the people who first domesticated this grain spent centuries developing a method to soak it in an alkaline solution of wood, ash, or lime. You simply take the dried kernels, grind them into flour, and cook them. You have no idea that this shortcut, this ignorance, is slowly killing you. You have taken the divine gift and, by stripping away the wisdom of the culture that created it, you have accidentally turned it into a curse. The sacred grain, once a source of life, is about to become the bringer of a strange and terrible new disease. Historians still discuss this great forgetting. How could such a vital piece of the puzzle be left behind? It was likely invisible to the Spanish. They saw women grinding corn. They didn't see the long, slow soaking process that came before it. They took the hardware, their seeds, but left the software, the cultural knowledge behind. And so, as maize becomes the sole food source for millions of poor Europeans, the stage is set for a medical disaster, a plague born not of a virus or bacteria, but of a forgotten recipe. You are a doctor in a small, impoverished village in northern Italy in the 1730s. A strange new sickness has begun to appear among the poorest farm workers, the ones whose diet consists of almost nothing but polenta. It begins in the spring, just as the sun starts to grow stronger. At first it looks like a bad sunburn. A dark reddish-brown rash appears on the skin of their hands, feet, and neck soon anywhere exposed to the sun. It is rough, scaly, and painful. It looks like the skin has been burned. You call it pellagra, Italian for sour skin. But it is much more than a skin disease. As the seasons progress, your patients begin to deteriorate. They become weak, dizzy. They complain of terrible stomach pains and unending diarrhea. Then, their minds begin to go. They become listless, confused, deeply depressed. They suffer from insomnia, then vivid, terrifying hallucinations. They descend into a dementia so profound they can no longer care for themselves or recognize their own families. The sickness seems to follow a grim, predictable pattern. A terrible trio of symptoms you start to call the 3Ds: dermatitis, diarrhea, and dementia. The fourth D, which all too often follows, is death. This is the disease of pellagra. It is a terrifying, baffling plague, and it is spreading. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, it sweeps across southern Europe, Spain, France, Romania, the Ottoman Empire, where that a poor rural population has come to rely almost exclusively on maize. It becomes an epidemic, afflicting millions and killing hundreds of thousands. And no one understands it. You, the village doctor, are helpless. You try bleeding your patients. You try herbal remedies. You try purging them. Nothing works. The most brilliant medical minds in Europe are stumped. They propose countless theories. Is it an infectious disease, caused by a bacterium or a fungus on spoiled maize? Is it some unknown toxin within the corn itself? Some even believe it is a genetic weakness, an uncleanliness of the blood found only in the poor. The disease carries a terrible social stigma. It is seen as a disease of filth, of poverty, of moral failing. Pellagra sufferers are often shunned, their families ostracized, their homes marked as places of contagion. It's a bit like the early days of the AIDS epidemic, a mysterious illness that disproportionately affects marginalized groups and is therefore blamed on them. The great irony, the terrible tragedy, is that the cure has existed for thousands of years. But it exists an ocean away, in the kitchens of the very Mesoamerican people the Europeans dismissed as primitive. The secret is nixtamalization, that simple, ancient process of soaking the maize in an alkaline solution of wood, ash, or lime does something miraculous. It chemically unlocks the niacin, a form of vitamin B3 that is naturally present but bound up in the corn, making it available for the body to absorb. Pellagra, the world would finally discover in the early 20th century, is nothing more than severe niacin deficiency. The ancient Americans, through centuries of observation, had developed a cultural practice that prevented a disease they never even knew existed. They didn't know what a vitamin was, but they knew that preparing maize in this specific way kept their people healthy. Historians still marvel at this. Was it a lucky accident? Or was it the result of a sophisticated understanding of food and health? You are a public health worker in the American South. In the early 1900s, pellagra has crossed the ocean again, this time ravaging poor sharecropper communities, whose diet of the three maize, meat, feck, molasses, and meal cornmeal, is dangerously lacking in nutrients. You are part of a team led by a doctor named Joseph Goldberger, who is determined to prove the disease is not caused by a germ. He conducts a series of famous, and frankly disgusting, experiments. He and his volunteers inject themselves with the blood of pellagra patients. They swallow pills made from their skin scrapings and excrement. No one gets sick. He has proven it's not contagious. Then, he proves what does cause it. He takes two groups of orphans from the same orphanage. One group continues to eat the standard, corn-heavy diet. The other group is given a balanced diet, rich in meat, milk, and vegetables. The second group remains healthy, while the first develops He has proven it is a dietary deficiency. The cure is simply good food. It is a landmark discovery, a triumph of scientific investigation, but it is a discovery of something that your ancestors in Mexico knew in their bones for millennia. The body of the maize god was always meant to be a part of a balanced diet, a sacred trinity with the bean and the squash. When it was isolated, made into a monoculture, and stripped of its cultural wisdom, the life-giving grain became a killer. Asterisk, the mystery of pellagra has been solved. The cure, it turns out, was not a new drug, but simple nutrition and the fortification of cornmeal with niacin. The plague recedes, and as the 20th century unfolds, you, the humble maize plant, are about to undergo your most dramatic transformation yet. You are no longer just a food, you are about to become a raw material, an industrial input, a biological platform as versatile as petroleum. The age of the sacred kernel is long gone. Welcome to the age of the industrial kernel. The journey begins. In the vast, flat, fertile plains of the American Midwest, this is the Corn Belt. You are a farmer in Iowa in the 1930s. The small, diverse farm of your grandfather with its mix of crops, its chickens, its pigs, its dairy cows is beginning to look inefficient. A new kind of science, corporate-funded agricultural science, is changing the rules. They have developed a new kind of maize, hybrid corn. This isn't like the slow, patient selection your ancestors practiced for millennia. This is high-tech, Mendelian genetics. Scientists are crossbreeding different strains of corn in a laboratory to create a hybrid seed that exhibits hybrid vigor. These new plants are astonishing. They are unnaturally uniform, each stalk a perfect clone of the next. They are bred to be shorter, sturdier, to resist lodging in the wind, and their yields are staggering, easily doubling or tripling what you could get from the old open-pollinated varieties. But there's a catch. The seeds from these hybrid plants are sterile, or they don't grow true. They don't produce the same vigorous plants next year. It's a bit like a mule, a strong and hardy animal that can't reproduce. This means you can no longer save your own seed from year to year, a practice farmers have followed for 10,000 years. You are now dependent on the seed company. You have to buy your seed from them every single spring. The ancient, sacred cycle of saving the seed has been broken and replaced by a new, commercial one. This new kind of corn demands a new kind of farming. You trade in your horses for a massive new tractor. You start using chemical fertilizers, derived from the same processes used to make explosives in the world wars, to feed your nutrient-hungry crop. You spray herbicides to kill the weeds that compete with your corn, and pesticides to kill the insects that want to eat it. Your farm becomes a monoculture, a vast, unbroken sea of corn stretching from horizon to horizon. It is incredibly efficient, and it is incredibly productive. The result is a mountain of corn, a surplus so colossal it makes the granaries of the Maya look like a kitchen pantry. By the end of the 20th century, American farmers are producing billions of bushels of corn, far more than anyone can eat as corn on the cob or popcorn. The price of corn plummets. It becomes, by a huge margin, the cheapest, most abundant source of calories on the planet. So what do you do with this mountain of cheap grain? The answer is industrial alchemy. You build massive factories called wet mills. These are the cathedrals of the new corn religion. Inside, the kernel is not ground into flour, it is dissected. It is taken apart into its constituent molecules. The corn is steeped, separated, centrifuged, and chemically transformed. It is no longer a food. It is a collection of chemical components to be reassembled into other products. From the starch, you create a whole universe of food additives, thickeners, and fillers. And most famously, through an enzymatic process, you create corn syrup HFCS. It is incredibly cheap, sweeter than sugar, and has a long shelf life. It quickly becomes the default sweetener in thousands of products: sodas, candies, cereals, ketchup, salad dressings, even bread. From the germ, you extract corn oil. From the protein and fiber, you create mountains of animal feed, making cheap meat possible by feeding it to cows, pigs, and chickens in massive factory farms. And the applications go beyond food. The starch is used to make the glossy coating on magazine pages, the binder in drywall, and the adhesive on envelopes. You turn it into biodegradable plastics, into ethanol to fuel your cars. Historians and social critics still debate the consequences of this industrialization. On one hand, it has created an astonishing abundance of cheap food and materials. On the other, it has led to environmental degradation, a loss of biodiversity, and a diet awash in processed foods and hidden sugars. The sacred grain, once the flesh of a god, has been shattered into a million different, often unrecognizable, pieces. You, the consumer, are still made of maize, you just don't know it. It's in the soda you're drinking, the chicken nugget you're eating, the glossy magazine you're reading, and the fuel in your car. The conquest is complete, but it is a silent, invisible one. The industrial kernel now reigns supreme. It has conquered the world, not as a god, but as a carbohydrate. Its victory seems total. The vast, efficient monoculture of yellow-dent corn feeds our livestock, sweetens our drinks, and fuels our cars. But in the quiet corners of the world, a rebellion is stirring. It's not a loud, political rebellion. It is a slow, quiet, and deliberate search for the grain's lost soul. A search for the heirloom's ghost. You are a young chef in a high-end restaurant in Oaxaca, Mexico, the very heartland where maize was born. You are tired of the uniform flavorless corn flour that arrives in industrial-sized paper sacks. It lacks character, it lacks history, so you begin a journey. You drive out of the city, up into the misty, mountainous villages, where the old ways have not been entirely forgotten. Here you find farmers, often elderly women, who have defiantly continued to save their own seed, year after year, generation after generation. They have protected their milpas, their small, diverse fields, from the onslaught of industrial hybrids. And in their fields, you see it, the rainbow. You see maize that is the color of the midnight sky. You see kernels of a deep, bruised purple, of a vibrant, blood red, of a delicate, speckled blue. Each variety has its own name, its own story, its own unique flavor profile. The blue corn has a nutty, earthy taste. The red corn is slightly sweet. These are the mesas, criollos, the Landry corns, the living descendants of the grain that built this land. They are genetic libraries, each kernel a book containing thousands of years of history, culture, and flavor. You buy a sack of this precious blue corn directly from the farmer. You bring it back to your restaurant, and you perform the ancient ritual of nixtamalization, soaking the kernels in a lime solution not just for nutrition, but for flavor. You grind the resulting masa by hand on a stone mate, and you make a simple tortilla. When your customers taste it, they are stunned. It tastes of something more than starch. It tastes of earth, of smoke, of history. It tastes real. You have started a quiet revolution, a revolution of taste, a rebellion against the bland uniformity of the industrial kernel. This movement is not just happening in Mexico. All over the world, people are beginning to search for what was lost. You are a baker in the American Midwest, surrounded by an ocean of industrial corn. Yet you seek out a small farmer who has revived a 19th century heirloom variety called Bloody Butcher for its deep red color and rich, corny flavor. You are a distiller in Kentucky, turning away from the commodity yellow corn to make your bourbon with a rare white heirloom variety prized for its creamy sweet notes. Historians still debate the future of these movements. Are they just a niche market for wealthy foodies, a bit of romantic nostalgia that can never hope to compete with the sheer efficiency of the industrial system? Or are they the beginning of something more profound, a widespread recognition that biodiversity is a form of wealth, and that flavor is a form of wisdom? You visit a seed bank, a cold, sterile vault where the future of food is kept safe. Inside, in thousands of small labeled packets, is the genetic heritage of the world. Here are the ghosts of 1,000 different maize varieties. Some were collected from remote mountain villages just before they were lost forever, replaced by commercial hybrids. It is a library of Alexandria for agriculture. It is a quiet, hopeful place. It is an admission that the industrial path, for all its productive power, has also been a path of immense destruction, wiping out thousands of years of diversity in less than a century. You hold a single kernel of this heirloom maize in your hand. It is not a perfect uniform yellow. It is a deep, mottled blue, the color of a twilight sky. It feels different. It feels alive with story. It doesn't promise a colossal yield or a cheap sweetener. It promises something else. It promises a connection to the past. It is a quiet whisper from your 10,000-year-old ancestors, reminding you that food is not just fuel, it is memory, it is culture, it is identity, and perhaps, if you listen closely enough, it is still sacred. We have followed this grain on its incredible 10,000-year journey, from a wild Mexican weed to the flesh of a god, from the engine of empire to a peasant's porridge, from the source of a deadly plague to the raw material of industrial capitalism. And now, a quiet return, a search for its lost soul in the colors of its heirloom ghosts. It is a story of incredible transformation, but perhaps, as we look back, we can see a single, unifying thread running through it all. Perhaps we can see the faint outline of a different kind of story. Let's go back to that moment of creation. The Popol Vuh tells you that the gods fashioned humanity from masa, from the sacred dough of ground maize. It was the food that gave you life, the substance that made you who you are. Now, travel across the ocean, to a different world, a world of deserts and shepherds. Listen to a different sacred story. A man in Galilee takes a simple, flat loaf of unleavened wheat bread. He breaks it, gives it to his followers, and says, "This is my body." The parallels are striking. Two different cultures, separated by an impassable ocean, with no knowledge of each other. Both arrive at the same profound, revolutionary idea, that God can become food, that the divine can be eaten, that the sacred is not something distant and untouchable in the heavens, but something that can be taken into your own body, to become part of your own flesh. Could it be that these are not two competing stories, but two different dialects of the same sacred language? Could the story of maize be seen as a kind of Old Testament for the Americas, a long history of a people's relationship with a divine gift of sustenance? For millennia, your people were nourished by a God who sacrificed himself every year, his body, the kernel buried in the earth, only to rise again, as new life the stalk. This yearly death and resurrection of the maize god was the central drama of your spiritual world. It was a promise of renewal, a guarantee that life would continue. When the Spanish priests arrived, they spoke of a God who died once, and whose single sacrifice was enough for all time. They offered a new covenant, a new body, but perhaps they failed to see that the groundwork had already been laid. Perhaps the people who had spent thousands of years understanding the world, through the sacrifice of the maize god, were uniquely prepared to understand the story of Christ. Historians and theologians are now looking at this history in a new light. They are moving past the simple story of conquest and conversion, and seeing a more complex story of convergence. They are asking different questions. What if the providence of the one Christian God was at work long before the missionaries arrived? What if God had already been nourishing this half of the world with the bread of life that they could understand, a body made from the grain of their own land? It's a radical idea. It reframes the entire story. It suggests that the sacred history of maize is not a pagan superstition to be replaced, but perhaps a foreshadowing, a preparation, a different testament for a different people. It doesn't erase the violence and the tragedy of the conquest, but it allows for the possibility of a deeper, spiritual continuity. It allows you to see the hand of the same God in the golden ear of maize and the pale wheat wafer. You can hold both stories in your mind at once. You can honor the sacredness of the grain that built your ancestors' world, the flesh of the maize God, and you can see in it a reflection of that other story, the story of a God who so loved the world that he became bread for its salvation. The two stories, once seen as enemies, can now be seen as partners. Two different grains, two different histories. One single astonishing truth, that a loving God provides, that he feeds his people, and that sometimes the holiest thing in the universe is a simple meal, shared in gratitude. The journey is almost over. We have followed this single blade of grass as it became a god, built an empire, circumnavigated the globe, caused a plague, and fueled an industrial revolution. We have seen it as a symbol of cultural identity, of poverty, of loss, and now, of rediscovery. The story is vast, complex, and full of contradictions, but in the end, it comes back to you, to this moment. You are sitting at your kitchen table. The day is done. The noise of the world has quieted down. In front of you is a bowl. Maybe it's a bowl of crunchy cornflakes, or a handful of tortilla chips, or perhaps a warm piece of cornbread, its steam rising in the quiet air. You pick one up, you look at it, really look at it. This small, unassuming piece of food you are about to eat is the end result of that entire 10,000-year saga. It is a handheld museum, It is an edible history book. In its golden color, you can see the faint echo of the sun that beat down on a Mexican valley millennia ago. In its starchy texture, you can feel the ghost of the grueling work of your ancestors, the endless scraping of the grinding stone. In its very existence on your table, you can trace the journeys of explorers, the conflicts of empires, the quiet desperation of peasant farmers, and the cold efficiency of industrial science. All of it is right here, in the palm of your hand. And now, as you get ready to eat, you have a choice. You can eat it as fuel, a simple input of calories to get you through the rest of the evening. That is the way of the industrial world. Or, you can choose to eat it differently. You can choose to remember. You can choose to participate in the final, and perhaps most important, act of this long story, the act of gratitude. You don't need to believe in the feathered serpent, or the maize god. You don't need to perform a sacred ritual. You only need to pause for a single, quiet moment. In that pause, you can feel the immense, unbroken chain of humanity, of which you are the latest link. Think of the first woman who chose to save the slightly better seed. Think of the builders who hauled the great stones, powered by this grain. Think of the Italian peasant, saved from starvation by her bowl of polenta. Think of the modern chef, rediscovering a lost flavor. All of their hopes, their struggles, their quiet innovations, have culminated in this simple bite of food. When you eat it, you are not just nourishing your body, you are honoring them. You are completing the circle. The journey of maize began as a divine gift, stolen from the gods for the benefit of humanity, and perhaps the only way to truly honor such a gift is to receive it with a conscious, deliberate sense of wonder. To see the sacred not in a distant temple, but right here, on your own plate. To understand that every meal is a communion with the past, a connection to the earth, and a prayer for the future. The story of the maize is not over. It is still being written, every day, in every field, and every kitchen. But your part in it, for tonight, is simple. It is to eat, and to be thankful, and then, to rest. The sounds and images of the story can begin to fade now. The rustle of the maize fields, the chant of the priests, the hum of the factory, the sizzle of the tortilla on the griddle. Let them all dissolve into a gentle, quiet hum. The long journey is over. The vast sweep of history contracts to this single, peaceful point in time, right here, right now. There is nothing left to analyze, nothing to understand. There is only the feeling of being nourished, of being provided for, the deep, quiet security of a full belly and a tired mind ready for sleep. Let go of the story of the grain, and simply rest in the gift of it, the gift of sustenance, the gift of rest. Allow your breathing to be slow and steady. Let each breath be a quiet prayer of thanks for the simple, miraculous fact of your own body. This vessel made of stardust and ancient sunlight, of stories and of bread. The world will be there in the morning, but for now, there is only this gentle descent into the quiet, fertile darkness of sleep, where all things are restored, and all things are made new again. End of script. Sweet dreams.